Welcome to the Trailblazers. I'm Perry Rarick, your host and chief editor of Follow Your Buyer. The purpose of this interview series is to share with you interesting discussions I have with trailblazing thought leaders. They're innovative and thought-provoking. They challenge the status quo, and they serve as vanguards for positive transformation. And my trailblazer guest today lives up to that entire description. She is Toyna Chin. She's an organizational transformer, and she's an expert in change management. She brings an entrepreneurial mindset to her work with a well-defined strategic business outcome supported by flexible marketing tactics. She's gifted in building high-performing lean teams. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit, and we're going to change your mind on what that means. And she fosters cross-functional and geographic collaboration. She currently serves as the global marketing director for Novotech. It's a global clinical contract research organization serving the pharmaceutical industry. And she's responsible for a 24-person marketing team geographically dispersed over 6 countries. And she's here with us today on the Trailblazers. Welcome, Toyna.
Thank you so much for that introduction.
All right. So fascinating. You have a fascinating story, and we're going to really jump right into that. So about a year ago, you accepted your current position. You took responsibility for this geographically dispersed marketing team, 24 folks over 6 countries. And you and I spoke a little bit like, wow, what were you thinking? You know, that's quite a challenge to jump into. So when you take on a role like that, if you can tell us the story, like what were you thinking when you started that role, and like what did you focus your attention on in the first 30 to 90 days?
Yeah, great question. First, let me say that, the culture within Novotech, specifically around autonomy, was really instrumental for me in laying that foundation for how I approach what we would consider change management, specifically those initiatives, and the speed for which I could come in and implement them. Second, it was crucial for me to really take the time to get to know my team before rushing into implementing any changes. And so I held one-on-one online face-to-face meetings with each of my team members so that I could learn more about their roles, their experiences, as well as their aspirations. I also spent a significant amount of time just observing, what are the dynamics of the team? What are the interactions of the team? What are the workflows, so that I could get a better understanding of how the team operated. I also asked and encouraged open dialogue. So I asked a lot of questions around things like the challenges, what successes they had, and even ideas for improvement. And I also made myself available for those informal discussions. And I think that was really important because I wanted to be approachable to the team. And I think all of these things help to build that rapport and the trust to ensure that when the time did come for me to make those changes, that they were thoughtful, they were strategic, and really supported, and really got the support from the team. And then finally, I had the team complete a RACI. And so RACI is a responsibility matrix. So it's responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And this helped me to identify their current responsibilities, but also to look at where are there overlaps within the team, as well as where are there gaps that I need to fill.
If you've been around this industry, well, in work, if you've worked any amount of time, we've all had new bosses come in the door. They take their jackets off and the cape rolls out, and they pump their chest and start telling you the way it is. What you're describing is a very different approach. And I believe it's a better approach. It's what real leaders do, and it requires a lot of patience. and it comes through in your style, even as you speak to me. So where does that come from? Did you learn that? Did you develop it at a young age? But how did you get comfortable with that level of patience?
Really, it was through trial and error. So it's having been in this space for over 25 years, and looking at what worked and what did not work in the various organizations that I've modeled the way that I am as a leader based on what I saw that was successful. So that's really where it comes from a trial and error and learning from the best.
Well, hopefully some young folks are learning from you, as you demonstrate this style as well, because we need more of it. We'd like to populate this across the globe. I want to stick with that understanding phase that you spoke about, getting to know your team, a globally dispersed team across 6 countries,
Yeah.
and getting to know them. Can you talk a little bit about the what, did you meet individually, small groups? What kind of conversations were they? How did you set them up to, get the understanding that you needed?
Yeah. So as I mentioned a bit earlier, face to face as well as one-on-ones, face to face, either online face to face, in-person meetings were the various strategies that I used to get to know my team. And as you mentioned, I do have a global team covering, I think, 4 continents. But we are also predominantly a remote team as well. So you can imagine the challenges that come up based on those dynamics. For me, face to face, in person meetings is particularly important because I feel that it just builds a stronger relationship. And when you see each other, seeing one another, it really allows you to pick up on those nonverbal cues and the body language that you may not necessarily get when you're having an online conversation or a phone conversation. Also, my team is a multicultural team, so that face-to-face interaction becomes even more important because it allows you to better understand the cultural backgrounds and the nuances of that individual member that, again, you may not necessarily get via an online call, or a regular telephone call.
That is interesting. Can you share an example of that? And maybe
Sure.
even like, where is your team? We really didn't cover that. It's kind of a mystery to our listeners at this
Yeah,
point. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm based here in California. So I have another team member located in Northern California. I have a team member located in Europe. About half of the team is based in India. I have another team member based in Korea, a handful of team members based in Australia, where we're headquartered, and then a set of team members that are based in China. So as you can see, we are all over the globe.
So that's complex, to say the least. What would be an example? Can you share an example of like it doesn't necessarily, maybe you were expecting it. Doesn't necessarily have to be a surprise, but something you ran into that caused you to think, cross-cultural communications. And then what was it? What did you do about it?
Yeah, so I was recently in India, visiting my team there for the first time, and one of the things that I came back with a kind of a aha moment was around autonomy. So Novotech, as I mentioned earlier, we have a culture within the organization around autonomy. But autonomy means very different things for different cultures. And so my aha moment while in India was that I needed to spend more time with my team, specifically the India-based team, around really describing what autonomy means. I think autonomy for, a Western culture could mean something completely different from an Eastern culture. So that was something that I kind of took back, that I needed to be sure that when I say to my team members, I want you to have autonomy to make decisions, to be proactive, that I'm really clear about what that means and taking into consideration those cultural nuances.
How did they take that? So how's that going? So how did you introduce it, and how's it, after a year, how is that going?
Yeah, so I was just literally in India just about a month and a half ago. So we're still we're still in that infancy stage of um, teaching and evaluating autonomy based on those cultural nuances. I would say for the most part, the team is very receptive to it. But again, we're still in the infancy stages of how to teach and bring the team on board as to what autonomy means from a global perspective.
That is really something. What a challenge. So, uh, so you have all of this. So you spend a certain, and I'm sure this is ongoing. Spent a certain, excuse me, a significant amount of time going through this understanding and learning and all of that, and then you embark on kind of some change, right? Change management, and you're upskilling, reskilling, reassigning tasks, and things like that. How is that going now? And then how did you translate your understanding to that and then communicate it?
Yeah. So, reskilling and upskilling any team, I would just say off the bat, requires really a strategic effort, because you're not only wanting to enhance those existing skills, but you're also looking for the team to acquire new skills, and you want those skills to align with both the current and the future needs of the business. And so for me, I utilized a handful of tools. So the first one for me was around having the team take a Strength Finders assessment. And Strength Finders, which is now, I think it's now called Clifton Strengths, was invented by Don Clifton. And the idea is to uncover an individual's unique rank of 34 different themes. And it discovers what, an individual does naturally best, and how to develop those greatest strengths that individual have, and then also identify where are those weak spots, and then based on those two kind of key areas, determine how best to then maximize their potential. So I had my team do that initial assessment. The second phase of that was to have the team go through one-on-one coaching sessions with a Strength Finders expert who could do a deep dive analysis on their assessment. And the third phase was actually having the team participate in a workshop to learn about each other's strengths and weaknesses, and then determine how best can we all work together based on our individual strengths and based on our weaknesses, and then how can we improve upon those areas where we're weak in. So I would say those would be the three key areas that I've utilized so far in upskilling, reskilling the team.
So the understanding and learning phase really continues, as you described it. It's not only you learning about them; it's them learning about themselves and each other. So there's another level to this, if I'm hearing you right.
Yeah, absolutely. And learning never stops. I mean, I'm also a big advocate for professional development. And so, I'll continue to upskill, reskill the organization. We're an organization that's changing. We've gone from the Asia Pac CRO to now a global organization. So our needs will continually change. So I want to be sure that I'm setting up my team to be successful. So as the organization changes, their skills are changing with the organization as well.
Yeah, that's great. And so the modern workforce, especially a younger generation or generations of workers, feel it's important to be part of something bigger than themselves. And certainly this is a natural fit in terms of trying to advance therapies for ill people. But so as you're going through all of this reskilling, you're learning about them, they're learning about each themselves and each other. There's a tie, and also you mentioned you're going through some changes. Your company is kind of changing a little bit, and we'll get into that, or you can mention it. But there's tying that in too with everything they do. So there's a linkage there, is there not?
Yeah, I would say the linkage would be around the professional development then of the team. And I think that, creating really a robust professional development strategy is important for any team, um, especially with an organization such as Novotech, where we are really in this fast-paced growth stage. So in getting to know my team through all the things that I've described, their roles, their experiences, their aspirations, through the Clifton Strengths tool, it really provided a framework from which I could identify what areas of professional development was needed and align that back to the needs and the goals of the organization. So, I'm also a strong believer in not only, you say, talking the talk, but also walking the walk. Meaning I'm not just asking my team to do professional development, but I'm also actively developing myself as a leader as well. And I think that's really important.
You also, I think, hinted a little bit that sometimes, and I that a younger workforce and maybe even females are a little less apt to get involved in networking, and which leads to oftentimes to professional development. And you feel that that's important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we found, and this is just based on just research in general, is that women often don't network as much as they should, and networking both, I would say, internally as well as externally. And there's a great tool that I would recommend everyone, not just women, to take. And it's assessyournetwork.com. It's a tool that I became familiar with earlier this year through some of my professional development work. And the intent of this tool is to really understand and strengthen your networking skills. So I'll just give them a little plug for that, and it's a free tool. But back to why women typically don't network as well as they say their male counterparts, and it's just based on the idea that networking is a lot about boasting about yourselves, versus really looking at it as a way to build your brand and to talk about your accomplishments. So I often like to advise women to look for sponsors, whether in a formal or informal way. Also look for mentors. Sponsors as well can help you within an organization overcome those barriers. They can also gain you the needed visibility. So those would be some of the things that I would advise the younger marketers coming into the workforce, as well as women, as some of the tips to leverage.
Great advice. That's really good. Um, one more question. You talk about lean teams. You build lean teams. And sometimes when people hear that word, they think, oh, budget cuts, we're cutting people, everybody that's left is going to have to do more, just in time logistics. I mean, people cringe when they hear that, but it means
Yeah.
something else to you. Would you like to
Yes.
share that with us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big proponent of the lean team methodology, and this is modeled after Toyota's lean principle, which is really centered around improving efficiency, collaboration, um, performance in really a continuous process or a manner. And the Japanese term for that is a kaizen. And so since joining Novotech, I've focused heavily on improvements in efficiency, in processes, in performance, and identifying and eliminating areas where I think it's waste. And the Japanese term for that would be muda. So through automation, for example, going from manual processes to automating processes, I was able to improve the efficiency of the team. And then through standardization of procedures, so aligning all of our regions to the same procedures, I was also able to improve their performance. And then looking at those non value added activities, which you would consider waste, like unnecessary meetings. I've, kind of given the guidance to my team that unless there are more than, say, 4 or 5 people on a call should be limited to 30 minutes. I've even scaled back on the frequency of my one-on-ones to every 2 weeks versus every week. So that is my definition of a lean team.
Thank you for that definition and that description. That's I think you're allaying a lot of fears. So that's great. We're going to take a break now. I'm speaking with Toyna Chin. She is an expert in change management and leadership. She is the global marketing director for Novotech. That's a global clinical contract research organization, and we'll be back with her in just a minute. We're back with Toyna Chin. She is my guest on the Trailblazers. And Toyna, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and transition into what you're doing currently at Novotech with that widely dispersed, globally dispersed marketing team. So you're employing a content marketing strategy focused mostly, I'm going to use your words, mostly on thought leadership content. Why that? Why are you doing that?
As Novotech builds its global brand, establishing ourselves as thought leaders in this sector or in our sector is really top of mind. And so, our strategy is designed to build credibility, trust, and really influence our target audience, which are biotech, biopharma, small to medium-sized pharma organizations. And so the ultimate goal is positioning Novotech as a go-to resource for global preclinical as well as clinical research needs.
Okay, so that's the what and the why. So what are you specifically doing?
Yeah. So our focus at the moment is around consistently creating, sharing that valuable, insightful content. And we do so in a variety of forms. We put out free disease reports and white papers each month. We have quarterly webinars, and then we have roundtables at key industry conferences. And so those are just some of the examples of what we're doing at the moment.
And how do you determine the topics you're going to pursue with the content?
Yeah. So, the topics are based on our goal tree or an objective tree. So we develop this annually as part of our planning process. And then we try to align our content development strategy based on the goals of the organization.
So can you tell me what that is? A goal tree? Did I hear you right?
That is goal, GOAL. Yeah, goal tree. So goal tree or an objective tree is what it's normally called, is the trickle down effect of what are the priorities of the organization for a year. So that typically comes out of the executive team planning. We're going to focus on X amount of areas for the calendar year. And each department or division will take that information and then determine how are we going to meet those objectives based on the goals that the organization has set. So that's an example of a goal tree and objective tree.
Very interesting. I love the use of the word tree in that. And so it starts at the top, but I assume there's a lot of collaborative work in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we try not to work in a vacuum. So the marketing organization is always reaching out to various stakeholders to understand what their needs are. So my team, for example, specifically the regional marketing managers, will reach out to their sales counterparts in those regions to understand what are their goals based on the goal tree, and to ensure that we're in alignment. So that would be just one example of working together and aligning across the organization.
Okay, so when you were talking about the outcomes for your thought leadership content marketing strategy, you did not say sales. Okay, and we know, of course, businesses have to, establish relationships, that lead to contracts, and it generates revenue. But you talked about building trust and positioning yourself as a global leader in this particular area, which is clinical contract research. So, how do you measure results?
Yeah. So we do the measurement of our results in a variety of ways. And our goal, our end goal really is to understand the impact of our strategies. We want to understand how best to optimize the campaigns that we're running. And in the end, we want to demonstrate the ROI on our efforts. So for example, around the content that I've described, we'll look at how many leads did that content actually generate. So we look at both marketing qualified lead as well as sales qualified lead. We'll look at views of the content. We'll look at downloads of the content. We also look at website traffic. So we're looking at conversion data specifically from a search optimization perspective, as well as a search engine marketing perspective. So those are just some examples of how we measure the results of our content strategy, as well as any of the marketing efforts that we're conducting at Novotech.
You also map the buyer's journey through this process. How are you doing that?
Yeah. So I want to take a step back a little bit, because I think that there is often a misunderstanding about the buying journey, or we call it at Novotech the client journey and the sales journey. And although they are closely related, they are really two very different, distinctive concepts. So the buying or the client journey really represents the process that a potential customer will go through from the moment they realize that they have a need or a problem until they actually make the purchasing decisions. And so this type of framework really helps marketers like myself understand the stages of decision making, and allows us to tailor the types of content and the types of strategies according to those stages within the journey. Whereas the sales journey on the other side is the process that our sales team follows, and that allows our sales team to understand how to engage with a potential client, how to nurture a potential client, and how to convert that potential client into an actual client. So two very different and distinctive concepts, but I think it's often confused that they are one.
What a great distinction between the two. I strongly agree with you. So, as your understanding of the buyer's journey, the decision-making process grows and evolves over time, does that inform your sales process?
It does, because we're learning more about our clients, and it's never a one and done. There's always an evolution of it. And so I would say that we're in the infancy stages of mapping out our client and sales journey. I recently mapped out more of a macro view of our client, and did so by conducting qualitative and quantitative research with our clients. There's still some work to be done there, but I would say we're really in the early stages of truly going deep and understanding the client journey and needs, as well as the sales process and journey.
So if I'm hearing you right, that was not being done before you joined Novotech. Is that right?
Not in a methodical way. I would say, I wouldn't say that it wasn't being done, but not in a methodical way. And just based on, again, the growth of the organization, sometimes some of the foundational components of marketing is often overlooked, not just this organization, but other organizations that I've been in, where you're growing so fast, you're basically trying to build a plane, as they say, while you're flying it. So we're kind of going back a bit, kind of like pumping the brakes to ensure that we have all those foundational pieces in place so that we can even grow faster. So that's where we are at the moment.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so, uh, as you gain an understanding of the buyer's journey, I like to call it the buyer's journey, but the decision-making process, that's really what it is, right? So your buyers are trying to solve problems. As that information becomes available, how does your team, how do they feel about that? Or maybe even the sales team as well.
Yeah, I think gaining that additional understanding and being able to use that understanding to improve that customer or client experience at every touch point that that client or potential client has with us is one area. Developing the type of content that really resonates with our audience is also really important. It also helps us to determine what channels are our potential clients and clients absorbing content from, so that it helps us become better about putting together a marketing strategy that really resonates well with our audience. So those are some of the things that we are gaining from really mapping that out.
Wow, what a year you've had. That's a lot.
Yes.
You've been very productive. It'll be interesting to catch up at the end of the next year and see what else you've accomplished. So I want to switch a little bit. We kind of touched on this earlier, but I want to switch a little bit. So there's a fair number of people who will listen to this who will be taking on a new role, and they'll be spending their first year in this new role. Some of them may not even know that that's going to happen, but that's going to happen this year. So I want to just switch to kind of transition to what kind of advice would you offer somebody like that?
Yeah, so I would say, understanding the sector that your business is in is probably the first piece of advice that I would give. The second would be around understanding your customers or your clients. So do your persona mapping, do your buyer journey mapping, do your sales journey. Ensure that you really understand your ICP or your ideal customer profile. Next, I would say understand the positioning of the company and the value that it's offering your customers or your clients, and then compare that to what your competitors are doing or saying. Understand the sales cycle really inside and out. um, Focus on building trust and credibility. Be sure that you are aligning your marketing metrics with those long-term goals of the organization, as well as your goal tree or objective tree that I talked about earlier. Look at both leading and lagging indicators. So those leading indicators might be those metrics or those KPIs that you're looking on at a daily or weekly basis. Those lagging indicators might be those metrics or KPIs that you're looking at from a monthly or quarterly basis. I would say that when you look at those leading indicators, it does give you an opportunity to be able to change course if something is not working. So those are really important. I would also say, don't be afraid to embrace technology and automation. You won't be able to automate everything, but automation in most cases will help with the efficiency of the team. I would also say manage your stakeholder expectations. Be patient. Not every marketing campaign is going to be successful. You'll have to do, A and B testing. You'll have to do some trial and error, but also be persistent. And then I would say foster collaboration across teams. There's often that, friction that exists between sales and marketing. You want to make sure that there is really key alignment with those organizations that you're working closely with. For the marketing team at Novotech, we work closely with the BD team or the sales team. We work closely with the HR based on an employer branding perspective, and we work closely with IT just based on the marketing technology stack. So those would be, I would say, the top 10 things that I would give as an advice to anyone kind of coming into a similar situation.
Great advice. That's really good. I'm going to go back a little bit to something you said, but you reiterated in that advice, which is it's important for somebody in a role like yours to understand the buyer's journey, to really have an understanding of the buyer's journey. And you touched on it a little bit. The buyer's journey begins much sooner than most of us understand. And I think you described it as at the point when the buyer discovers they have a problem or a need.
By the time a buyer or a client makes their way to your website to fill out a form, for example, say that they'd like to speak to your sales department, they are further down in the buying journey than you might imagine. And so it's really important to understand or figure out how you can get in contact or track a buyer or a potential client earlier on in the buying journey. And there are lots of tools that are out there that will track things like, an individual's IP address. So when somebody goes online and does a search for a particular topic, there are tools that will allow you to track that type of activity, and that would be called an intent topic. And so we use various tools to be able to track intent as a way to get earlier on in the buying journey than later on.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm glad for the expanded explanation of that. It's I hear it come up a lot from people who really know what they're doing. It's very good. What advice would you have for somebody who's a little newer in this profession? They're in a marketing team somewhere, but one day they want to be the global head of marketing for an organization like yours. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think great question. I would say honestly, first is really take it into consideration that there's no perfect linear path. Um, the reality is that careers are often non-linear, they're diverse, and that they're unique. And although I knew that I wanted to be in marketing, I had many stops and starts. I also did a stint as an entrepreneur at one point before coming back to corporate. But some of the I would say the key advice that I would give, and I talked a little bit about this, especially women, is that networking, both internally as well as externally. And I mentioned assessyournetwork.com as a way to really understand and strengthen your networking skills. And then finding mentors, whether in an formal or an informal capacity. Also, find a sponsor within your organization that can help you overcome barriers and give you the needed visibility. Also, I would say determine if you want to be a generalist. So a generalist marketer would be someone who has a broad range of skills and knowledge, or if you want to be a specialist, that's someone that focuses deeply on a specific area of marketing. So if you take me, for example, I would be considered a generalist because I understand marketing across various areas. A specialist would be somebody that would be specific to maybe SEM, or SEO or digital marketing. That would be considered a specialist. And I think, these types of advice, I think, can open doors and new opportunities and really provide that essential support and help to accelerate any type of career development. So those are the advice that I would give those budding marketers.
Excellent advice. So, Toyna, thank you very much for joining me today. This has been really great. I've been speaking with Toyna Chin. She is the Global Marketing Director for Novotech. They are a contract research organization that spans the globe. And she has been our Trailblazer guest. Thank you, Toyna Chin.
Thank you so much, Perry, for having me.